Well, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like folks are filtering in from the waiting room, and it's really great to see some familiar names and some great folks joining us. We'll have some great time for a question and answer later in the session. My name is Andrew Reinertz. I'm the Community Development Director with Art South Dakota, and just really thrilled to be joined by Dustina Gill from Nis'to Incorporated. And really looking forward to talking about some of their work through doing youth leadership training through both arts and community building, and how they're able to root their work as a nonprofit and their programs in the local community so effectively. So first, I need to quick say a thank you to some of our partners that make this webinar series and our work at Art South Dakota possible. This includes the South Dakota Arts Council, the Bush Foundation, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts. Also, today for the Q&A portion of the session, please feel free to ask questions anytime. It really helps if you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom just so that we can keep track of all of the great questions that come in. But then also use the chat function to talk to other attendees or the panelists, or if you have any technical issues. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just thank you again, Dustina, for being here today. Um, so, maybe to kind of set the stage for some folks that might not be as familiar with the work of Nis'to, kind of generally speaking, what does the nonprofit do and where are you based out of?
Nis'to is based out of Sisseton. Um, sorry, your question was the areas we focus on.
Yeah, just kind of some of your programmatic areas.
We have three pillars. One is art, of course. Two is land restoration, and three is food security. And you'd be surprised at how much they all intertwine together.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Um, and so with that, with the land and the food security, you purchased 30 acres of land, is that correct? And that's where the Earth Lodge is as well?
Yeah. We purchased 30 acres of land to do land restoration. 5 acres of that is for the human activity, all of our movement. We call it the bundle carriers camp. And so far we've built an earth lodge. Right now we're currently building what we're calling a summer lodge, and it's basically an earth lodge without walls. Um, we have yet to build our bark lodge, which is another cultural dwelling, and then our shower house bathrooms for future camping areas.
Well, some of the arts work you do, maybe tell us just a little bit more about that. I know that some of the work with youth involves some there was poetry, there was beading, there was a number of projects that you work on with the kids. And how does that kind of fit into your overall programming?
So when we started in 2016. Like I've been doing this stuff my whole life. I was a youth advocate when I was a youth. But I realized I needed in order to be, I guess, better at what we do, I had to find the right vehicle to do it in, and a nonprofit seemed to be the best fit. So we became established in 2016, and we held our first, I guess, series of workshops. Um, the first one we had was baby moccasin making, and that was a month long. Every Wednesday we met in our old offices, and then it was blanket making, and then it was shawl making. We had put a inquiry out to the community, what are you interested in learning? And as with all of our events, the requirement is, because it's for youth, adults are allowed, but you have to bring a young person with you. And I knew that kind of threw some adults off. And I said, grab a niece, grab a nephew. It's for them, doing different art things or seeing different art opportunities come through the communities. I realized there wasn't much space for youth. It was more like, be on the side, And I always think if kids learn these different types of talents and stuff, it just helps them even more. And then I always imagine them at our age, and how awesome they'd be, getting to have the same opportunities as an adult artist. Um, in the beginning, the goal was and still is to have a generational learning together to create bonding. Of course, we don't call it that. Nobody comes to healthy community bonding creation circles or whatever, but at the end of the day, that's what it was. We had singing for the little guys, and while they were singing, we had the moms or whoever brought them would make drumsticks for them. And if they didn't know how, then they learned, and my big thing is nobody's born knowing everything. So always being understanding to people who sometimes hesitate to come forward and say, I don't know how to do that. It's like teach them the way we were taught. And one of the things that it's just grown, I guess, based on the different needs. You see all the things popping up and that we're doing, those are based on the requests of the kids. We're very youth led.
Well, this might be a good opportunity. You and I were talking beforehand about the TP pop-up art show that was last year. Could you maybe tell us just a little bit about that, and I could share that video that you had me pull up.
Yeah, so every year we wanted to do a TP pop-up, and this is a collaboration of um, adult artists in the community. We created a group called The New Old, the Sisseton Arts Council, and I think he's on the Zoom, but somebody who comes in every summer from LA who brings in a really nice different lens of framing art here, I guess. Um, So every year, the first year we had it, and the venue was, building a really nice space. It was cold out, so it worked. Um, then we had it in one of the old motels, which was really cool. I hope we can do that again. That was really interesting. Um, each room was a gallery. And then last year, we thought, let's use TVs as a separate gallery. We put a call out to all the artists. Um, And then pretty much nobody was denied. They got to bring their thing. We had music, we had performances. Um, it was really exciting just because, you know, it's here. There's so many artists here, so many performers here. But yeah, if you want to show that video, they can kind of get a.
Yeah, one moment. I don't think the audio went with it. There we go.
There is sound on there, but yeah, a lot of artists. Sometimes this is the only time we see each other. We're all across the area. But if you see the different styles, it's always exciting. Some wood sculpture, some of our traditional artists.
How many artists were involved in this year?
Oh, gee, over 20. I want to say over 20. And it's crazy how many things are just coming out. It was so exciting. And how many of them were like meat. That's a buffalo bladder. Those are buffalo bladders. How they were some of them meeting each other for the first time. the young artists who came out, who got to meet the older ones, you know, um, just increasing our artist community. That's Brian and Kipa. These are the poets.
Yeah, I think it's so difficult. So many artists were kind of in our necessarily in our own worlds, and it's hard to get out and be with fellow artists and really collaborate and commiserate and talk to each other sometimes. So having the providing those opportunities is really important. Yeah, that's really great. I didn't realize that the motel show was also a part of this. That was um, kind of brings me to one thing I know I've heard you talk about in other interviews I've seen and other articles I've read about the work of Nis'to, but really kind of finding the resources in the community and building on those. And one aspect of that is space. And you know, if there isn't a great space for it, just making that space, making the roadside motel be the art galleries and just kind of creating that. But before I get further into that, I kind of this is a good maybe time to bring up that you really focus a lot. It seems like on partnerships. You know, I've you brought up the Sisseton Area Arts Council and when Marcus Tracy is in town, but then also I know there's quite a bit with the Sisseton Wahpeton College with like the traditional games that are taking place there, but also some partnerships with is it University of Virginia?
Mhm.
UVA, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, without having to get into too many details about all those partnerships, but how and why? You know, what brought you to be so open to those partnerships and what have you found kind of effective with that?
So when we first started, we had nothing. We had an idea. I had money saved, and we were doing things out of the house, out of this room actually. And then we needed a gathering space. We tried the house, and there was way too many people. We started renting the building with another person, and we outgrew that space right away. And back to our currency was corn, dried corn. You'd be surprised that that's something as Native people we do. You could go a long ways without exchanging a penny if you barter. So that was kind of the only currency we had going for us. And getting to know more of the people in the community who were um, having similar goals. Gosh, I can't think of it. The Arts Midwest, the We the Many project is when I really connected to a lot of our non-native artists in the community and became, friends. Geez, we lived in the same area, but just never knew each other, And we all got to talking and goal sharing, and it was like, well, how can we make this happen? And they knew more people, we knew more people, and started connecting. UVA was always there in the beginning. Um, one of the professors there had actually lived in Sisseton years ago and always wanted to come back and be a part of the community, in some sense. And I was like, well, I'm all about reciprocity and just kind of like how we can all help each other in the best way without being extractors to each other, because that that happens really easy if you're not careful. Just be mindful of the resources they're sharing, and time, I think, is more valuable than money. So always making sure that you're not taking too much of that. But you'd be surprised at how many people want to be a part of something. You just have to ask, and I'm not scared to ask, and sometimes it's something like back to the food security. We've had people come in and help with stuff when we didn't have anything to give them, but I would always say, what do you need that I can give you in return if you could do this? Some wanted gardens planted. Okay, so I'd go spend a day, put the garden in for them. You know, I could do that every day if, but slowly we've gotten grants. We are looking for those grants that would, see the collaboration that we have going on in Sisseton, just to do more. A lot of what we do is still volunteer based. Our funding goes towards supplies. Um, we do have a commitment to always honor the artist and make sure that, if we have funding for them, that we give them compensation based on whatever funding we have at the moment. But the one thing we don't do is chase the funding because, working in government for 15 years, you always lose sight of the goal and you end up kind of changing who you are and what you're doing based on what that funding wants. And what we do is always have the freedom to do what we want to do the way we want to do it, the way we think it needs to be. And working with kids, sometimes you got to switch on the fly. You got to take your little plan thing and chuck it and say, you know what, we're going to do this because maybe there was something in the community that they're all feeling. With the poetry, the spoken word, we've done that a lot. Um, if there's an incident in the community and we had our little plan with the kids, it's like, we're not going to talk about that today. Let's rant right, and it would come out and everyone just switches papers and they read it out loud, and it's to me, art is very healing in so many ways, and no one's gonna walk up to you and say, I need to heal, you know, um, like this room, this mural behind me was done during COVID, you know, just we all need our space to think and meditate and have our own little, and I see art does that for everyone, and we get together and do something.
Yeah, is do you find that that's one of the ways with some of the kids in particular? I've it was amazing to me seeing some of these other interviews that you've done of how you've been able to infuse this kind of healing and mental health awareness as well as that kind of trauma-informed work without having to call it any of those things because I was the same way as a kid. If someone had said, "Hey, come sit for this, mental health awareness sharing time," I wouldn't have been caught within 100 feet of that. So
Yeah.
how do you use the arts to kind of start those conversations?
So one, we use the term healing informed. Kids are told, I think enough, society enough gives them that focus in all these other spaces of trauma, all of these things. And it's like, we want to be a place without that. Everything's resilience based, strength based. Some of our poems that we do, like one I love every year we do it at camp. Um, it's called Where Do You Get Your Medicine? And you wouldn't believe the beautiful things kids have in their lives. But it's also for them to take home and remember um, those things in their lives because social media and everything now is something's got to be wrong to have attention. And it's so dangerous. And I wish people would understand that. So it's just a quiet flip side of it to not say, well, you got to remember, it's just like, let's do something great. Here's something beautiful, but also so they can take it home, hang it up. And if they're by themselves having a hard time, they see it. And hopefully it's a reminder that, hey, you got a community of artists. You got to call them, text them, When I was really young, as a poet, doing all these things. And my uncle would come home. He's an actor. And he'd come home to visit every, I don't know, 5, 10 years or something. And as I got older, he was encouraging me to send all my poems in, get them published. I just never, you don't think you're capable, whatever. And he brought back video cameras and he was showing kids how to do plays and all these things. And he said, one of the hardest things of coming home is seeing the unrealized talent. And I always remembered that, like starting Nis'to, it's like, what's my role? You know? And a lot of times I think it's just being a catalyst in the community, finding the different people and resources out there who love to do the same thing. It's just I like to organize. I know I'm a good organizer. So hey, I'm gonna organize a group of us and we're gonna do a 2-day workshop and a pop-up art show, you know? Yeah.
Um, yeah, that brings to mind for me some of the other things that you've talked about in other articles and places of that resource motivated, the what is going well that you can build on in the community and not just what's broken and what do you need to focus on. Did you find that that was something that was helpful to you switching from the governmental role into the nonprofit role to be able to be more nimble in meeting those needs? And do you find is there still too much of a focus on that from funding sources, from foundations and grantors trying to find the problem, the broken thing, and not focusing enough? Or how do you find that in your work?
I think so. In government work, you know, I stayed in the position I was in because I thought it was the best spot to be to bring opportunities to the youth, to our tribe. But in all of that, I got to see where all of these cracks were created unintentionally by different grants. You have somebody who creates a grant and they've never been to the reservation. Back when we first got established, we were invited to the White House to meet with Obama's administration. And they were like, "We heard about what you're doing, you want to," and I kind of patterned after watching how the administration as a government worked with nonprofits. We have the funding, you have the people. It's a good match. And they created it was a report and I was looking at it. And so when we went up there, which dried corn got me on this trip. I didn't have money then. Um, and I said, you have the right intentions, but you're people who are creating these programming, they're getting funding because you're talking about the suicide statistics, the substance, all of these negative poverty porn type things, um, using those stories to get the funding, but they're creating opportunities on the reservation who push those kids out. They're calling it a leadership program, and kids who are trying to be a part of it can't be because they miss school. You're I see you have a lot of absences in school. I see you're failing. I see you've gotten in trouble. Well, these are the kids who are suicide survivors. These are the kids who are siblings of people who have died. All of these things where if all of that is going on, school is your last priority. So getting to share my thoughts with them on that is like you have to be, you have to understand and move with the needs. Um, and if anybody, I don't know who's on here, understands government funding, it does not let you do that. It does not. It creates more boxes that you have to try to fit people in that. And if you're an artist on here, you don't usually artists usually don't go with the flow. You go do your thing. Um, so we've gotten to talk to different funders. I've gotten to sit on different panels and have these conversations. You know, Pilot project was a big term in the government for a while, but it's like give an organization who's doing great work the funding and let them show you a whole different way that things could happen. Like check out those boxes that we've used forever because things have shifted since then, you know, and give it a chance or Arts Midwest has been really good with that, being really open to kind of following that. that change or that shift.
Yeah, I've often thought that with nonprofits generally and arts nonprofits too is um, one of the hardest things is when you've been around for a little while, sometimes you win if you're no longer needed. If you've changed the community enough to support whatever you are doing, maybe you're not necessary in that form anymore, and you need to grow and change and meet the new needs of the community. But it can be so hard when you have that momentum of X number of years of doing similar things to notice that maybe the community around you has changed in the meantime.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing or not being on top of, you know, working with youth. I'm bringing in younger mentors, and bringing in younger people as we transition. I'm not going to be in this role forever. I know that. There will be a day where it won't fit. I won't be a good fit for the organization because I might be, maybe my thinking's too old, whatever. But I have to always understand that, um, we have to be open to that. We can't become a part of the one thing, we're trying to change. My big thing working with anything with Nis'to, and there have been a lot of obstacles, on different levels, as understanding, it's not about the battle, it's about the war. What's my goal to get the kids in my community and their families to where they need to be or want to be or whatever without telling them what they need to do. And that will always look different. My role isn't to be the right one.
How do you how do you kind of go about that on the ground learning like that? Is it just because you're working with youth and you're kind of constantly bringing in new ideas, or are there particular ways you try to engage with the community to kind of learn more about what's going on and what the needs are?
There's so many different layers to our community or pieces. We have our Indigenous games area. We have the horsemanship area. We have our land conservation restoration area. We have our food sovereignty people. We have our elders and the traditional arts. Actually, one thing we've been doing is I run across this every time we do a pop-up show or we try to invite new people into coming. They don't see, and I get it because I'm like that. We don't see our native things as art. Like this belt, we wear it still. It's like calling your watch art or your shoes or, these are things we still do. Um, so we have so many artists out there who kind of hesitate, like, well, how is that art when I still, you know? So we're coming up with a whole different Dakota term for that. Speaking with our elders, so you'll see it. We'll be coming out with a whole different shift, and it still includes everybody, but it's going to be our word, you know. Um, but one is that just kind of being open and listening to everyone out there, from the youth to the elders to the parents to the caregivers to the people who work with them, if it's an organization or a program or department. Um, I would love to have a big event and have people who work, the judges, the police, foster parents, just anybody who works with anybody in any sense to see, because it is a game changer. Why do we do art? It makes us feel good. And now imagine if somebody who's never done art, they actually every month, when we have our monthly art club, art night, we have a local police officer who moved to the community, who's an artist, come in, and he's led one of the art nights and did a live sketch, and that just blew our mind because he's a cop. He was in his cop uniform drawing, and the kids just loved it. And I think, watching him interact with the community gives him this different sense of understanding everybody at a whole nother level than somebody who just, won't give it a chance.
Yeah, I find art, I mean, it's no guarantee of peaceful coexistence by any means between different parts of communities, but at least it's one shared experience. You know, it's something that we've done together, and at least we can point to that one thing of, you know, the kids have experienced this person as a person. The police officer as a person, and vice versa. The police officer has experienced these kids as people and not just from their role and that distance that they need. And yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, what just it's great. All the conversation, I've just been checking off all the questions I've had for you because they've kind of naturally just come up in conversation. You know, as you've been working, maybe digging a little bit more into that idea of kind of the term for art in traditional arts, you know, is so you do find that that is something that has been somewhat problematic or difficult for folks to view some of the things that they do as art versus as objects in use, or you know, I know for a lot of people there is that difficult distinction between functional things being art versus art being behind glass, you know, on the wall and kind of used as a way to both sometimes as a way to novelty, especially native communities. You know, how has that been something that you've addressed at Nis'to?
We don't, I guess whatever they create is what they create. We've had kids paint skateboards and use them. They put them as a part of the pop-up art show. They were actually stolen from the art show, which I turned it into this big thing because they were young artists. And I talked about some movies where there was art stolen. It's in Paris, and they were like, so they think they're, it's whatever helps us create a confident artist as a child and as an adult too. But again, my focus is kids to create a confident artist, and whatever space they choose is like always a goal. If it's something they're going to use, even if it's something they create and it's destroyed at the end of the day, you can't be like, oh my God, you know, we could have put that on the shelf. It would have been beautiful. You know, that's for them to decide its purpose, I guess. Um, and I think with a lot of the more art things happening, a lot of our adults have realized that's also a way of life, a way of living. You know, when I was younger, an artist was something that's not a real job. That's not a real thing. You need, clock in 8 to 4, 8 to 5, whatever. That's a job. Creating art isn't on the same level of that. And I see that's changed. A lot of people are like, oh, you know, I wish I could do something like that. My life would probably be more peaceful. I don't know if it's true or not, but um one thing I've seen with so trying to understand like the grant world, I've done grant reviews, infiltrating the system to understand what is it the artists are interpreting as going after these opportunities, but also what is the funder looking for? What do they what do they want? What do they want you to stay or here in order to be worthy of whatever funding? And it was so interesting because artists think so free. You could tell it's hard to fit themselves in the box of this. One of the things we've asked for, the conversations like, how can we do this different? How can we do it better? How can we get more artists to apply? It's like, well, let's change the application process. Let's do a video. They don't need to sit down and write in 2,500 words or less, because who really even counts that? But just submit a video. Here I am, blah, blah, blah. It's more free and you can capture the emotions and feeling behind it versus something you've probably redrafted 5 times, you know. Um, so that's one exciting thing. I hope I get to see it, a small shift happening in the different funding worlds that are more, I guess, artist friendly.
Yeah, I really like how you put it of kind of infiltrating the system of just seeing how it works to see both how you can navigate it and change it as you can. Um, um, yeah, that's really interesting. Do you, one question I have is, again, you talk a lot about the untapped resources in the community, and um, what do you see in the Sisseton area as the next untapped resource? What is the thing you wish you could kind of tap into more and help foster next?
I think we have a lot of unused spaces that I hope Marcus, I think, is on here, that we're gonna hop on there, Marcus. Um, there's so many things for this town that we could do. Anytime I go anywhere, I always go to the artist co-op space. Some of them have really awesome the way they're organized. Their art galleries, some of them, just how they make it happen. Because while we're doing all of this, we don't have that yet. That's why we have something different every year. But I always think it'd be nice to have a building just for that because it's cold 7 months out of the year, you know? It gets dark at 4 p.m. So if we had an artist gathering space where it's just open, like we do one for kids, we're probably gonna do one this summer for the adults and kids and basically whoever, just to come bring a project, we're gonna hang out and work on it together and eat snacks. Just because sometimes people need that, you know. But it'd be cool if we had a building just for that, a shared studio. Racing Magpie, I thought was so awesome when I toured their building and how like every level of artists, shows, everything was all in one under one roof. That would be really cool.
Yeah, it was really interesting how they've been able to have and everything from bands to musicians, bands, visual artists, poets. Yeah, having that space and the both for doing the work and for showing the work, and they've done some really interesting things. Speaking of some of that, one question that has come in from the audience is just has the TP pop-up art show been scheduled for 2025? Is there one that's maybe going to happen this summer? I know you and I were talking a little bit beforehand about the complexity of doing that every year, but just curious.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something that's going to be annual just because it was everything but outside. You know, we had the art, we had poets, we had music, we had performances, and what, a 2-day event. So yeah, probably in August. I'm waiting for Marcus to get back because he's gonna help it.
Um, Well, if there are any other questions from the audience, please do send them in. But in to kind of wrap up, just wanted to kind of ask you: Are there, in addition to that untapped resource idea, are there any new programs or upcoming events you're particularly excited about, or anything else you'd like to share with the arts community that's watching today?
There is. So we recently got selected for the Native Pathways Fellowship program, where we're working on talking about creating an art space. What would that look like? We have the Earth Lodge. I thought ours would be fluid back to changing needs. Um, we have the Earth Lodge. Everything out there is out. We're off the grid. It's all solar. And we have a wood stove. And then the summer lodge would be for the summer. But again, we're a huge reservation. We have so many communities here. One of our furthest communities is almost an hour away. So while the kids we see, there's so many more we don't because of, they're so far. And one of my things I really, really want to do is get um make a mobile art studio. First People's Fund has one like that. They came here and we did murals at the lake, which I thought was awesome. And I thought, "Well, we could do that too. And we could, go anywhere and everywhere, whatever the theme is, we'll put it along the bus and head out to wherever and then have mini art sessions and a little blab or whatever we want to call it in the wintertime, because winters are very real here. So that's one thing I'm manifesting. People want to manifest that with us.
Yeah, that's really exciting. That's always, I think, in general, in this in this part of the land is just where we're all there's so many incredible artists, so much great work happening, so many resources, but we're often hours apart from each other, and so it's really hard to just be in the same space, let alone doing the work that's hard to do. But just even getting to the same place to be able to do the work can be really tough.
A summer ago we were at Pine Ridge doing an art thing with them, and we had artists. The group of kids that we were with, they were from poetry, sketchers, all these different types. And I said, "Have you guys ever seen sunrise over the Badlands?" No. So we got up really early and we got there, and I said, remember it, take pictures of it. We're gonna sketch it later. And I just, and I was standing back, we're all tired, but watching all the kids stand there in a row, watching the sunrise over the Badlands, I thought was like the best thing. Like everyone should do that. But getting them to there, yeah, that's the challenge.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dustina, and thanks for all the great work you're doing. I know that you've been all over, and it's great to have you back in Sisseton. And really appreciate all the work that Nis'to is doing, and for your time and willingness to share some of what you've learned and how you do your work. So thank you so much.
Hmm. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for attending. And please reach out to any of us at Art South Dakota if we can be of any help in your work in the state. Thanks all.